It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays, and this Wellness Wednesday, well, I'm a day late, but I want to talk about positive male role models because this was the theme for International Men's Day this year. And as typical of International Men's Day, instead of really focusing on the positives that can come from this, even though it's not recognized by the UN, a lot of these days aren't, but that gets held against it. Instead of focusing on the positives, it got mired again in, we don't need it. Every day is Men's Day. And it's really interesting to me how the people that say these things claim to want better for instance, domestic violence, better treatment of women, that kind of stuff. In order to get that, we need to center the good men and not make the bad men seem normal, but also in order to prevent violence against women, we have to work on the men. We can't just say, don't be bad, and give men absolutely no idea how to be good. Hence, positive male role models. But positive male role models are important for women as well, and I don't think that this is talked about enough. I'm living proof that non-parental positive male role models can have a really significant impact on you, even if your biological father is not a great person. It also gives women, heterosexual women, other models of what to expect from men. And, we'll get into positive female role models later. That's just fraught. We don't have enough time in a half-hour video, right? So let me do the help support this channel and we'll dive in. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. We had some interesting International Men's Day chats on the Discord server. I thought it was Monday and it was Tuesday, so go me. It's November 19th. I thought it was November 18th. I don't know why. I didn't mention it on Monday because I didn't want there to be a whole uproar because people were going to be searching yesterday. So I'm doing it today because I don't think getting embroiled in the mess does much good. I think that one of the things we talked about on the Discord is how whenever there's sort of sexism at play, it hurts both genders. I mean, it's undeniable that both defined genders suffer from stereotypes. Even the positive stereotypes don't do much good for the people that don't embody them. If there are really, really rigid norms or types, like prototypes, archetypes in society, then anybody that doesn't live up to those has a rougher ride. And that's where role models come in, because masculinity is just under half the population. Femininity is just under half the population. I say just under half for both. How does that add up? Because of, non-binary people and people who sort of opt out from the whole thing. So we have to break down, sorry, I'm really tired. I just kind of spaced there. We have to break masculinity and femininity into sort of smaller bits, right? So that there's no way for there to only be one type of acceptable man and one type of acceptable woman at any given time. And one of the things we talked about on the Discord is sort of the drift towards these more, rigid ideals when sort of monotheism. And I mean, with Judaism, there's 3 patriarchs and 4 matriarchs. So there's more choice. As unlike the other monotheistic faiths that only have one kind of ideal man. Even Islam, where, Muhammad had multiple wives, so there's different kind of female archetypes, but there's just Muhammad. Are you supposed to say peace be upon him here? I don't know. I'm not Muslim. But with, I can only go based on my faith that I'm most familiar with. And I know some Christians use this framework as well, but the whole, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob thing, 3 very different men biblically. And this is where we start with male role models, because was Abraham a positive male role model? What's interesting about the Old Testament characters is they did some really good things, they did some really crap things, and Abraham was intending to kill his son until God went, whoa, dude, slow your roll, right? And so Isaac ended up very fucked up. And Isaac is a really interesting male role model. And we see the influence of Isaac all the way into stuff like The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien drew heavily from Isaac the Passive Patriarch in Frodo Baggins. And I think that Isaac was probably of great interest to Tolkien because, obviously he was more bookish, more studious. But then, his whole experiences in World War I of missing most of the war because he had trench fever. That idea that you don't have to be active to be a good man definitely got infused into the ring bearer of Frodo. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. Sam, we don't talk about Samwise Gamgee as a positive fictional male role model, but that was sort of the helper. In a lot of ways, Sam is the most noble and brave character in the whole Lord of the Rings saga. All the hobbits are little people in a big world, and they all have to be extremely brave. Now, obviously, Merry and Pippin have more kind of active adventures. But, the fact that Sam is a really simple guy, but he's a very important character at the end. All the way through, he's sort of a companion. And we don't talk about men as companions and role models all that often. Men are the alpha, right? Which is a misunderstanding of how the whole alpha thing works. But anyway, this is an example of how role models aren't necessarily what you think for men. And then, of course, there's Jacob, who, Jacob's life is possibly one of the most messed up of the whole Testament. And that's saying a lot alongside, Abraham and then, Noah. Noah, I wouldn't say actually is that positive a male role model. Contentious figure, because, the interpretation that I find the most interesting is Noah kind of blew it. The reason he ended up so unhappy is because he didn't fight with God to try to save humanity. It's like, you must build the ark. And Noah goes, okay. Instead of going, wait a minute, you want to kill everybody but 2 of each animal. P.S. Do you know how bad that boat is going to smell? And that's the cool thing about the form of Judaism I practice is you're encouraged to argue with God. You're encouraged to question scripture. You're encouraged to question the rules. You can't just ignore them. You need a conscientious reason to go, I don't think this practice really fulfills the commandment that it's supposed to. And here's why. The whole idea is that you're supposed to fight with it, because that's how you figure out moral reasoning. And ironically, I saw juror number 2 over the weekend that deals with the idea of what men matter and what men don't. And there's a real strong underpinning of the idea of good people and bad people versus people who do good things and people who do bad things. And you might be going, okay, what's the difference? Well, you can go down a real slippery slope going, I'm a good person, right? Because if you just assume you're a good person, then anything you do has good intentions, therefore it's good. And you end up doing a lot of shitty things accordingly. Because good people can't possibly do bad things. Good people always have a reason for doing things, even though people, you know what I mean? Whereas sort of the morality that I subscribe to more is that goodness is a question of your ongoing choices and doing what you believe is the right thing, even if it's hard, even if it has negative consequences. And one of the guys I work with this week, he had a really bad result on something, but he did absolutely everything that he could have done. He was brave. He was honest. He gave other people reasonable benefit of the doubt. And so I told him that it didn't go your way this time, but I'm proud of you for look at all the things you did that, we're good here. We're positive steps. And those were the elements that he could control as opposed to other people, which he could not control. He seemed a little confused at first, but it was a good kind of confused, because I think most men don't get, when things don't go their way. They get you'll get it next time or something like that, but they don't get the breakdown of, look, here's all the things you did right. You can't control outcomes. So you can be, I'm proud of you. You can be proud of yourself for these steps you took. Keep doing that. It's good for you, And I don't think a lot of guys hear that. One of the things we talked about on the Discord is when you have a lousy mother that frames your opinion of the whole world, because obviously that's your most, for men, your most powerful female role model. Similarly, for a lot of women, the relationship, we talk about daddy issues, we don't talk about mommy issues nearly enough. But again, mommy issues are something for another time. And women can have mommy issues too. Don't get me wrong. But with, men and women, if women aren't exposed to enough male role models throughout their lives, they end up with this very narrow idea of what men are, which is, another conversation I had this week was somebody saying, why do men do that? As if all men do things for the exact same reason. That's coming from somebody who might not have enough, male role models to realize all men don't think the same, right? And why is this important? Well, because throughout your life, you're going to have positive and negative experiences, right? You need enough diversity in the people you interact with to see that the bad experiences are not necessarily indicative of that entire group. And the positive experiences are not necessarily indicative of that entire group. Remember I said like men and women, the groups are just too big to be very useful, which is why we need, you know, the matriarchs, the patriarchs to begin with. You know, the interesting thing, as an aside, the interesting thing about the Jewish matriarchs is one of them is a woman who, you know, Jacob, again, was tricked into marrying because they wanted to marry off the older sibling, Leah, is who I'm talking about, before the cute, pretty, adorable, super likable younger sibling, Rachel, could get married. And so Rachel and Leah's father tricked Jacob into marrying Leah first, and then you give me, you know, years more work and you can marry Rachel as well. But it was not exactly a happy multiple marriage. But Leah turned out to be almost like female red green. You know, if the men can't find you beautiful, they can still find you handy, right? And that's pretty much that. You know, you can still do things. You can still have a role if you're not that traditionally feminine beauty, right? Then there's Rebecca, who was Isaac's wife, who was very kind. I mean, Isaac was so introverted that his servant needed to find him a wife, and so he goes out and picks the kindest person that he could find because, well, Isaac needed that. And then, of course, there's Sarah. Sarah, Abraham's wife, who couldn't have kids until she was 90, according to the stories. Probably not literally true. But you see, it's all very... And I do think that that's, you know, an important thing as well, because it shows that women aren't defined by children. Rachel, ironically, had trouble having children as well. They were saying stuff in the Old Testament, but not everybody does church. And I get that, or synagogue, or mosque, right? It's always church, but even I do that, even though I don't go. Well, I go for other people's things. But so the archetypes, the male role models, fictional, that we're more familiar with are superheroes. And that's where it becomes more challenging, because things get tropey very, very quickly. And we talk about tropes versus women, but we don't talk about tropes versus men. You know, when every hero settles things by punching shit or some alternative, what does that say about what it means to be a man? Now, that's not strictly true. There's a lot of, you know, especially during the Comics Code era, they had to not, you know, the whole Batman doesn't kill thing. For instance, that's always sort of, it would be nice if Batman only uses the minimal amount of violence, because the whole Batman doesn't kill thing really rings hollow these days, where if you read a Batman comics, there's eyeballs flying everywhere and there's splashes of blood, and like some of those guys he beats so badly, you know, I mean, he gets beat up plenty too, but this, you know, obsession with pain and violence, and that's my issue with Batman lately. Here's a guy with so much money, and he could help prevent crime before it starts, but traditionally he passes that work off to Alfred and Lucius Fox so that he can go beat guys up in black leather. That's not heroing, that's a kink. But that's a joke. Whereas if you look at Superman, I mean, if Superman and Lois is coming to an end, so maybe now's a good time to binge the whole thing. It's Warner Brothers, who knows how long it's going to be anywhere. But it's an absolutely wonderful show, and I do think that Superman is a really good male role model without being perfect. He's actually far from perfect. You know, sometimes he gets mad at his kids, and it's not totally fair because he's under stress. He's confused by his two sons, but the relationship with him and Lois is possibly the best they've ever done, because they show, first of all, what she brings to the relationship in terms of she has her own heroism, but also, you know, as a reporter, but also they talk to each other, they support each other. It's not just one way, and it's not, you know, that old school being pissed off that he missed things. She's more like, go. She's so used to it by this point that it's like, yeah. And it's a really, really good, in terms of fictional male role models, it's probably the best one out there right now in this age of anti-heroes. And I kind of like the nice ones. I can't help it. Like Alistair in Dragon Age. Not the smartest. Also something of a, if Samwise Gamgee mixed with Aragorn. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with being nice. There's nothing wrong with seeming a little bit dense because you're nice. It's okay to let people underestimate you. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be super strong. There is a place for a kind male role model. And this was the thing that really came home with that whole She-Hulk debacle, where guys weren't seeing themselves in the superheroes that, you know, like Daredevil on the show. Because I said, why would you choose to see you guys yourself in the douchebags outside a sports bar or the bad dates that she self-selected into by letting her super shallow friend write her dating profile for her? And, you know, like, why would you choose to identify with them as opposed to like Matt Murdock? And what I kept hearing was, I don't have superpowers. And you don't need to. Superpowers didn't make these guys good people. The whole point is what they do with the powers. And that, I think, is where the lack of, you know, we focus on fathers a lot. I don't want to do that here. I want to talk about greater male role models outside of your dad, because we do need more than just your dad. I had absolutely wonderful male teachers who had profound influences on me just because they were fair. Even the really tough ones were fair. And that was a real nice break from home. But that's the thing. I could eventually sort out the crap with my biological father because I had other examples. And because mentorship of young people is so, nobody wants to do it because nobody wants to get labeled a pedo. And even before that, it was on the decline because nobody wanted to get sued. It's always cover your ass. And there are really good reasons for that. But it's unfortunate because I benefited from teachers willing to take the risk, even though my father would go in there and scream at them sometimes. I don't know why they kept going after that. They were good teachers, and They were clearly good men. But that's important, right? Because I know that, shocker, all men aren't the same. Similarly, all women aren't the same, but maybe we'll do female role models next week. Female role models and mommy issues. But having that diversity of examples really made me go, okay, not all men are the same. Excuses are not reasons. What's the difference between a reason and an excuse? Well, a reason is your guide to doing better. An excuse is the reason you don't do better. And, one of the most powerful lessons I learned from my high school math teacher was actually say when you're not doing well before there's a test. Because if you say something, then we can make other arrangements. But if you don't say anything until afterwards, well, it's written. And I'd never heard of the idea that you could say, I'm not doing well, mercy of the court. And the idea was just foreign to me. And I've paid that forward. Like, I really encourage people, say something. There've been a few people that got things hit them the wrong way on the Discord, and they temporarily left, and then they talked to me about it. And if you're coming to backstab the mods, you're not going to get a good hearing from me. But these are people who just left. There was no conflict. They just saw something and left. And then they're like, they started having second thoughts about it. And we talked about it. And I said, I'm glad you told me, instead of just leaving. And every single one was like, I was afraid you'd be mad at me. And I'm never going to be mad at someone for having a bad reaction. I'll be not pleased if they blame me for it, but you know what I mean? Feelings are legitimate. Feelings matter. Not every expression of feeling is equally good, right? These are such simple concepts, but if you don't have people in your life modeling that, a very, very important thing that male role models do is show men and, young men and boys that, and peers as well, that anger doesn't have to be out of control rage all the time. That's one thing that male role models that were not my father taught me, that someone can be angry and it's not an explosion that leads to them screaming at you for hours. Like hours. I think back about it now. How did he have the energy? Unwell, right? That's, you can be angry and not do that. You can be angry and still in control. And what it teaches women to have those male role models is that man's anger doesn't always have to be scary. And learning to know the difference between a guy who gets angry and can process it and a guy who gets angry and gets scary. And you need the compare and contrast, and this is not just true of women. I know a lot of men who are extremely, conflict averse isn't even the correct term. Their conflict terrifies them. The idea of conflict terrifies them. And because their experiences were, the minute there was conflict, someone had to suffer. And that is not true. As long as nobody behaves in an abusive manner, conflict can be good. You really see who someone is based on the way they fight. At least I believe that. But, Kratos is one of my inner voices. And, I mean, God, there's a major role model for me. And it's so interesting because I settled on Kratos as a metaphor for my PTSD before the games did. Um, and to see him like not mellow, because, is that moment where I said, people say I'm mellowed and it really pisses me off. And everybody started laughing. And I'm like, I guess it is kind of funny because I haven't mellowed. He hasn't mellowed. He's healed some. And then there was more hardship. And then he had to work through that. And he's working through it. And, he's got this kid who's very different from him. And then there's the whole metaphor of not doing the whole fate thing. Like, we're not doing this. He's going to have choices. And when you consider Kratos' past with the gods, you understand why he did that. He didn't go through all of that to just go, the fates, destiny. No, not again. And someone can have flaws. Oh, hi, Midna. And still be a good role model, because part of it is how to deal with your anger, how to deal with your vulnerability, how to deal with sadness, how to deal with when, your body doesn't work the way you want it to. That's a tough one. The good thing about having older people in your life and showing them respect is, keep an eye on that stuff, because you'll feel like a jackass if you mocked older people when, hopefully you get older too. Because no matter how much you exercise, no matter how much you eat right, stuff just starts working not as well as it used to. And you hope that there's a trade-off, right? That, okay, the body doesn't work like it did when you were 17, but, and that's not even 17, 20, 24, that kind of period. But you can deal with stuff way better. And what a role model does is lessens the pain and the learning curve and the learning time, right? So, instead of having it together by like 35, you can have it together by 30, right? Nobody has it totally together by 30. Nobody. I just started getting stuff vaguely together when I was like 28 years old. And how do I remember it was 28 years old? Because that's when I started being told I was too old for things like being on television. Great people. 28 years old. Like, I think of that now, like, wow. But they were bad people. In those cases, they really were terrible people. And why? Because they continued to do terrible things and never made the choice to not do something terrible. Even when they were nice, there was something terrible in it. And that's the thing. If all you're surrounded by is that, then you get the sense that that's the world. And if you're discounting the positive people, because, they just must be fake. Well, that's an assumption, right? There are people who are accountable, who are trying to do better, who are willing to work with you instead of against you. They are there. One, you have to believe it's possible. You have to let them influence you, let them inspire you. And you have to be prepared to not let the bad people, around you too much. One of the things I learned from, working with very, very rich people, angel investors and things like that, is when they told me about how they approach meetings, I listened, right? And one thing I noticed is they're like, I wanted to see what they had to say. Might be interesting. They're not going in there saying, I'm looking for an investment. They don't go in hungry. It's like, I'm just going to take the meeting. I'm going to see what there is. Because they're always prepared to walk away from a deal that's not right for them. Not a bad deal, a deal that's not right for them. They don't have to judge. Really, really rich people, like really rich people, not the disasters, like debt finance disasters, like, Elon Musk. He is very rich, but you know what I mean? The ones that are stable, they are the chillest people in the world. It's like, it's okay. I lost $100,000. It's okay. Because money doesn't have meaning to them. And when you see these guys and how they work, you're like, you know what? I'm going to start acting more like that and see how it goes. And you discover the bad deals or the deals that aren't right for you a lot sooner that way. So that's just one way, surrounding yourself with different types of men and trying to not be intimidated, right? Like the risk, the perceived risk is just too high now. This thing we've put in so many women's minds that every man is a potential rapist. It's not true. And there are ways of being, getting to know men and benefiting from their experience that are safe. And being open to that, being open to learning, not just judging and going, well, that's different, so it must be wrong. I've never heard that before, so they must be lying or trying to manipulate me or grift me. No. It's not grift until you give them money. Okay? Again, be prepared to walk away. But this is just some ways that a variety of positive male role models can really benefit everyone. And you notice I had both regular people that impacted on my life and then superheroes and like Spider-Man shit. And Spider-Man shit, that's a shining example of male role model in action. Like Spider-Man shit. We were inspired by Spider-Man. Inspired by Spider-Man. That is hard to say. Inspired by Spider-Man. Inspired by Spider-Man. Inspired by Spider-Man. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, time to stop the video. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching and be well.